that all nodded was the group of foolish ones. And they slept. In the middle of the night, verse 6, at midnight, the cry was raised. And lo, the bridegroom. And it says here, go out. Again, there's the word again, ek. It's sheste. That means out of the meeting that you're in, go out of that one into this other meeting. It means to go, but it means to go out of where you are to another meeting. Because they were already in the first meeting from verse 1, when they went into a meeting in verse 1. That's the ariston. Now they're going into the deipnon, the marriage feast, plural. The ariston was the early meal, which took 1 day in heaven, 1,000 years on earth. The second meal, 1,000 years on the earth, 1 day in heaven. That's the deipnon, right? That's what's going on here. Yes?
Vicky said the bridegroom delays until the bride is transferred. What is the delay about?
There you go. Good question. Right, you're right on point. Right on point. So great point. So the delay, it used to be taught.
And then she said, "Is this the marriage feast?"
So the delay is they've been to verse 1. They were transferred into a meeting. What meeting was that? The ariston. They were transferred in verse 1 into the meeting of the ariston, where the foolish and wise were. They didn't know who had the extra measure of oil until the ariston's coming to an end, and because it's taking so long, they didn't realize how long it's going to take, because when you're going to and from on Jacob's ladder, the days are getting mixed up in your mind. Because think about this, you're 1 day in heaven, you're gone for a couple minutes, but you're on earth for years, and go back minutes, years, minutes, you're like, blah, blah, blah. That messes with your head. I'm just saying, it's hard to keep track of that. So when you're doing that, let's say you're astutely awesome human, you keep track of all the time frame. Okay, the point is, who cares? Why would you be counting time? You're enjoying doing the Lord's bidding at that point. You're just doing, you're in a sinless state. Why would you not want to just be enjoying the reality of heaven and earth, to and from Jacob's ladder, ministering on the people on earth, going back to the heavenly ariston? You're enjoying that. But then all of a sudden, you get tired of this. So the delay, he's taking this time, meaning they're thinking, how long do I have to keep doing this? Because they see him on the earth reigning for 1,000 years, but that's a linear time frame for him. For them, it's not linear. They're going up here to a heavenly time frame, earthly time frame, earthly, heavenly, earthly, earthly, heavenly. This is crazy time. they're like, how long is this going to go on? So they lose track of time. So the delay is, how long will this be required of them, this ministry, this to and from Jacob's ladder typology of what Jacob saw with the angels going to and from? They are ministering to people, and they're trying to figure out how long is this going to last, right? And so they're saying, well, I don't know. So they just kind of get tired, and they nod off. They get tired of it, and they nod off. Not tired of it physically, tired of it from a standpoint of, it says physically, but it's speaking to that sense of they get fatigued from the spiritual obligations, which is what, unfortunately, is not good. Yes, sorry.
And Vicky said, is this the same as the parable of the invitation to the marriage feast, where you must have your garment?
Yeah, so that's, yep. So this is the, that wedding feast in Matthew 22 was the ariston, coming to an end of what's going to happen in the movement into the deipnon. Yep, that's what's happening here. So this is a movement from ariston to deipnon. And so in verse 6, remember what that means, by the way. And if you read the bottom of your dialogue, it's a great story down here. Bobby Dial has a great story of a Hindu, literal, factual, actual, what happens in a marriage. It tells you the whole story about, forget what I'm saying to you, it tells you the Eastern culture of what happens. And Hindu, because that's an Eastern religious expression of what Hindus did, Jewish folks did, Muslims folks did back in the day. This is what the Eastern culture does. We westernize marriages. In the East, it tells you how they do it. And it speaks to what we're talking about. They understood there was a waiting period before the big reveal of the bridegroom later on. And so even though they were transferred to wait with these flames lit, and he talks about that in that story, you can read it, it's pretty awesome. So anyway, with that being said, so this verse 6, at midnight, the cry went out. That's John the Baptist, by the way. That's him. He's the one doing the cry. He is the voice in the wilderness crying out. He is the fulfillment of that when Jesus was first born, and he was the one who leapt for joy when the news came that Mary would have the impregnation of him. he leapt inside the joy with Elizabeth's womb and filled her with the Holy Spirit. And it was his heartfelt understanding that he was to be that one, to be that voice in the wilderness, and he did that very thing, faithful unto death. Now, and Jesus even said there was no man born greater than him. He said he must increase, I must decrease. His sandals are not fit to carry. But he is that voice of that bridegroom. And so he's the one in verse 6. It's actually not people. I used to think it's a group of representation of a friend. No, it's him. It's John the Baptist. It's him. He's the one who says, as he did back in the day, I can just imagine that, by the way. They're going, oh, here he goes again, you know. Here he goes again. He's always dubbed that. He's the preparer of the way, and Jesus is the way, and he's always the preparer. That's who he is. That's his title. So he's at midnight the cry goes out, and behold, it's John the Baptist in the heavens all of a sudden saying, and by the way, the word cry is a loud, emotional cry. I love that. It's just a cry like, behold! No, he's like, behold! He's, woo! You know? He is like ecstatic. John the Baptist is like, let me tell you something, brother. Let me tell you something. You all think you're happy. I was the one who prepared the way for his first ministry where it ended in death and violent carnage. And now, I get to introduce the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords who's been on the earth for 1,000 years, and now he gets to take his rightful throne in the heavens, and he gets to actually take his bride. Oh, I can't wait to announce this. That's why he's so happy. He got to announce the beginning of Christ's ministry as the prophet, and he gets to announce the beginning of Christ's ministry as he has now fulfilled his priesthood ministry and his kingship ministry. Now he begins his bridegroom-bride relationship. Oh, he can't wait to announce, it is done. It is finished. He's done it all. I announced it when it started, and I'm going to announce it when it's over, Jack. He'll have done prophet. He'll have done priest. He'll have done king. He'll have done it all. And he'll be the bookend. The voice before it started and the voice when it ends. It'll be John the Baptist, man. That's who this is. It's him saying, that's why he's so emotionally excited about it. I wish I was there to give him a high five. It's just unbelievable. So he's just saying, behold, go out to meet him. He's so happy. He's so elated. And then in verse 7, then all these virgins arose. And by the way, if you're thinking about, well, if they all arose, does that mean they all slept? Well, the word here for arose is the word for egereth the sun. It means to rise up. To rise up from, again, remember, from a horizontal state to a vertical state. And this is speaking to these wise people being given a glorified body, being given that resurrection of the out-resurrection. Some arose from sleeping, others arose into a resurrection of the out-resurrection, of the better resurrection, as mentioned in Philippians 3, 8 to 11. Yes?
And Pam said all in verse 7 ends in AI also.
That's correct. Let's go back to this. Yep.
So these are the foolish only who arose?
So let's go back and read. So, yep, so here, yes and no. So let's go back and read this. So he says, then those all, Padai, same is your point. It's in the AI. Then it says the virgins, AI again, but now it says all, it says, is the word for virgins, which is the same word before, which is the parthenois. So you see the parthenoi being used here. So it's the Padai, I, parthenoi, not ois, oi, right? So all the virgins arose, but here's the thing. He's mentioning, I want to make sure we're clear on this. He's mentioning that they all, when he says the all Padai, that's referring to the later word you see there where it says exenai, where it says those. You see that right after the word virgins is the word those. It's the word the exenai. So this word here, hexenai, this word he's talking about is connecting to the all. So the all those who nodded rose up, but the reality is all the virgins rose up, he's pointing out. Some rose to a resurrection, but the reason he puts the I, the AI at the end of Padai, is he's saying the Padai, those are the ones that rose up to put in order the lamps of them. So both rose, but one rose from a sleep, from nodding off, the foolish, and ones were risen up into a resurrection. That's the difference. So they all rose, and the reason why the AI is there with the I, the all, is to differentiate between those that rose among the foolish are the those where it says the virgins, that's all the virgins. But he says the all then connects itself to the later as well, to the those, and put in order the lamps of them. And the putting in order, it means, it comes from the word cosmos, and ek, it means ek cosmoson. It comes into a reference to Peter when he says that a godly woman, because she's walking with God, out of her walk with God, she adorns herself. She ek cosmoson. She adorns herself out of her spiritual walk with God. She's ek cosmoson. She's adorning herself outwardly with the spiritual morality and purity of walking with God. So in this case, they're trying to respond out of this cry, those who have fell asleep, with putting forth the best presentation they can before God. Okay, I'm ready. Well, you obviously aren't ready. They saw the phaneroo moi, the wise, getting risen up to a glorified body, and they're going, okay, I'm trying to match up to that. You can't do that. So you obviously can't generate in yourself. If you weren't risen to a glorified body, then guess what? You're out of luck. It's not, you can't just do that. That's done for you. So God did that. So he rose, they all rose. He said, then arose all, but the virgins, those who put in order the lamps of them. Then he says in verse 8, the foolish, this is what they say to those phaneros, the phaneroi, they said, hey, give us out of the oil of you. Meaning, give us out of the, obviously you have a glorified body. Could you give us something that could make us have that same body as you, as they're going? No, it doesn't work that way. I can't give you sanctification, reconciliation. I can't give you a depth of God and his word and that relationship that's built over time. That's an insightful perspective. That's a savvy intelligence of spirit that I can't, that's not for me to give. God gave that to me. And I had to do something with it, and I took the extra measure of oil with me to be prepared for who knows what, knowing there was always more, knowing there was a glorified body, but I didn't know it was going to look like this. This is pretty awesome. And now you want to have some of that. I can't give you. Did you see me give this to myself? No. I didn't do this. I didn't add the oil to myself. I didn't make myself have a glorified body. I didn't will it to exist. God did it unto me. I can't give you what I don't have to give. I can't give it to you. I didn't acquire it. It was given to me by God. God found it suitable to give that insight to me. He found it suitable to reward me with these things. I'm not the rewarder of things. I can't do that. So they're saying, give to me what you. He said, no, I can't do that. And they said, but in order to get to where I was, you have to have at least a foundation of insight and knowledge. So they say to the foolish ones, they say, look, the prudent said, what you want to do? The prudent said, what you might, there's not enough to suffice, meaning it's insufficient, there's not enough. God gave me for me, not for me and you. He did it for me. Remember like the manna from heaven? He said, take the manna just for this day and go out and get manna for the next day. So God gave me just enough of insight and knowledge for me. He gave me enough preparations for me. And he says, well, give to us. He says, no, I can't share with you, in verse 9, the prudent says, lest there's not enough to suffice the archese, not enough, it's insufficient for you and for me. But rather you go to the one selling ongoing and buy for yourselves. Who's the one selling? The unjust steward who's on the earth. The unjust steward who knew all along at the bema seat when he was found unworthy of his stewardship. And he was like, oh, I'm not going to make that mistake again. I might never inherit again, back in Luke 16's passage, but I'm going to make sure that I tell the people who owe him wheats. Remember that he cores of wheat and baths of oil? He tells them, you better get your journal right. It ain't funny. Oh, he's an exacting master. You better get it right now. He's helping people, right? The unjust steward's helping people to get their ledger right. And that's what the foolish, the wise say, I can't do that. The jig is up. It's over. I can't give you. That's not my thing. You go to them who are selling down in the air. That's what the unjust steward's job is. God sanctioned him. He sanctioned us to minister to each other and to those on the earth. He sanctioned him to give what was needed to get to the right end in mind of the baths of oil and cores of wheat that's owed to him. I can't do that. That's not my thing. That's his job. Go to him who's marketing and selling on the earth. Go to them. And they're like, oh my gosh. So they go down there and to the earth, to and from. And as they come back, it says, and those that were ready, those readied ones, hetomai. That means some were ready and some were not. which gets me to, it doesn't say all the wise ones, it says the prepared ones, which means that some of the foolish ones did get clemency from God, just like in the Ariston, he gave clemency to those that weren't prepared, gave them a garment. He gives clemency to some of these foolish people to gather quickly enough oil to come back and be ready. And so I believe that, you know, there was a few, maybe two. I think there's two, because there's always a remnant, which would mean the lesser of the five. So 2 of the 5 did, in fact, get ready, and they were included in the hitomoi, prepared ones who went in. And that's what that's talking about. Yes?
Okay, Laney said this position of not having enough knowledge / oil is so profound, especially since it is sovereign, and they realize this is the last minute. Horrifying.
Now take what we just talked about, and let's go back to Hebrews chapter 6 and look in 2 verses, 11 and 12. We've already studied that book before in depth. A long time we took on that book. We've studied. It is profoundly awesome. All God's word is, but that one is really whoo. But in verse 11 and 12 of Hebrews 6, he says, I didn't write the book, remember? But you got Barnabas writing this, who's telling us, oh, by the way, but we earnestly desire, we passionately desire that each of you show the same diligent, the best efforts for the full completion, the full ongoing carrying through, full bearing of the hope, for the full completion of the hope to the end, so that, or in order for, because of, that you would not become sluggish. Foolish virgins are dull and sluggish, remember? He's telling you the answer in verse 11 of Hebrews 6. You have to retain, you have to obtain being wise, but you have to ongoingly retain that and add to that, or else you become sluggish. You just can't stay still. He says, but imitators of those who through faith and patient, who through faith, right? Through faith, it's through faith, not through laziness, right? Not through sluggishness, through faith, and the plural, ongoing, under suffering, under duress, under pain, you endure, are the ones who are inheriting, plural, those plural promises. That is who is in view as the wise took the extra measure of oil because they understood Hebrews 6, 11, and 12. There's a whole full completion out ahead of the hope to the end. I didn't write that. God wrote that through Barnabas. And he talks about so you have the endurance, and you have which are the inheriting of the promises. Then you go back again to our text, and you read also in James, one more thing actually, in James 5 and 8. Let's go to James chapter 5, verse 7 and 8. In James 5, 7 and 8, he says, waiting patiently, therefore, brethren, till the coming of the Lord, James 5, verse 7. That is the Perusia's plural of the Lord. Yes?
Todd said, I don't understand why the foolish can go somewhere else to obtain deeper knowledge, but the wise virgins who are in their midst can't teach them.
They can teach them. That's not the point. Let me answer this question. It's a great question. They are able to teach them. They have the resources to teach them. That's not the issue. The issue is they are basically entering their graduation ceremony. Okay? The ones on the earth, the unjust steward, has no chance of ever inheriting and ever going to heaven ever again. Ever. But they're the only ones who were there, who should have been there, and are now here, and they have the depth of knowledge. So when they give of themselves, there's nothing to forfeit. It's already been forfeited. That's why they're the ones who sell and market, because they can give and give and give. There's nothing to lose. They've already been stripped naked of their inheritance. They have nothing to lose. They have everything to gain. By giving of what they don't have anything to gain an inheritance, they can at least gain God being pleased with them. That's all they want at this point. It's all they can possibly gain. is God being pleased with them and responding to their consequence for their sins, for their ignorance. So that's why they're the ones who can give. They have the expendable resources and the expendable ability to give without any negative recourse to themselves. That's why. Those in heavens can do it too. But if they do that, it's a negative recourse to them. And why would they do that? They're like, I'm not doing that. No. No. That's between you and God. No. God gave you provision for that. That's you and him. And then the segue to that would be there's a secondary extra credit class that's on earth. That's not my job. I'm not the extra credit. He's the extra tutor on earth to help you out. I can't do that. That's not my thing. I don't throw pearls before swine. It ain't happening. You're not deserving of that from me. He deserves the right to give that to you. That's his job. Because he's the only one that can do that. The unjust steward. That makes sense what you're saying. Yes?
Okay, first of all, Todd said, I don't understand why the foolish
Yeah, you said that, babe.
somewhere else to obtain deeper knowledge, but the wise virgins who are in their midst can't teach them. And then Vicky said, there is not time.
Well, there's not time. There's that too, because on the earth, he gains more time in relative nature because time passes slower on earth than in heaven. So he has not just the person to go to, but that person on earth who has a lot more time to deposit into them, because a lot more time passes on earth with only a little bit of time passing in heaven, which gives them more time to acquire what they need as well. So there's that as well, Vicky's point about that. So there's that element. God's not ignorant. God knew that. So the reality is on the relevance going back to verse 9, verse 9. James, I suppose in James. In James chapter 5 and verse 7 and 8, I was going to point out here, in James 5, 7 and 8, James says that the Lord, wait patiently, therefore, be brethren, till the coming, or the perusias, plural, of the Lord. Behold, the husbandman expects the precious fruit. He expects ongoing, looking for the precious fruit of the earth, waiting patiently, again, ongoing, for it till he receives the early and latter harvest. He receives the betrothed bride at the beginning of day 7, and he's looking to procure them as his bride. And then on the earth, what's he doing? What's the latter harvest? The Jews on the earth are becoming the wife of God the Father. That's what's going on. Now, if you understand what I'm saying there. So God the Father, his people, the Jews, when they are in tune with him, they're seen as the wife of God when they're living in the ultimate highest level of their obedience and fruit yield to him. When you're in Christ, in Testament, living at the highest level, then you're the bride. But the God the Son has the bride. God the Father has the wife. That's what happens. So that's why it's the early, the bride, and then the latter harvest is the wife. That makes sense. So he's talking about the end of day 7 is when the latter harvest of the wife is revealed of God the Father. The early part is when the bride is betrothed, and they already know who she is, but there's more being added to her. And then you have in verse 8, he says, be you also patient, establish your hearts, because the coming, or the perusia of the Lord has approached. So again, he's talking about these things in reference to an early latter harvest, and the perusias, plural, in James 5, 7, and 8, because even James knew, even though he wasn't talking about the prophetic aspects of it in total, like all the discourse was, he does make mention of it. That the bookends of the thief of the knife who began the perusia of the Lord will be the same thief of the knife who ends that perusia of the Lord. And there's the perusias. So he's revealed again as the king and as the bride. Yes, bridegroom, I should say. Yes.
And then Vicky said the early harvest is the wheat bride, and latter is flax wife.
You got it.
Okay.
Yep, you got it. Yep, wheat and flax. So we're way over time, I apologize. So in the last part here, when he says, go and buy for yourselves, in verse 10, and while they were going away to buy, that's ongoing, both sense. They were going away ongoing, they were going away to and from, and they were buying to and from. They came to the bride, then came the bridegroom, and those prepared ones, the homiotoi, those prepared ones, entered with him, meta, with him, into the nuptial feast, plural, meaning they were a part of both. The prepared ones went through both doors of the ariston and the deipnon. So when someone says, why is it plural? They're going into one, they went into 2 meetings. I didn't write the book. There was a meeting in verse 1. Did it not say that? They went into a meeting. Verse 1. I didn't write it. Verse 6. There's a call. Go into the meeting. That means there's another one? So there's 2 meetings. So when he says feast, plural, of course it's going to say plural. If I meet you at the pre-meal before the wedding and we're talking, hey, it's look like a pretty fun day. It's going to be a great day. These people are nice people. We're drinking some sodas and having some little hors d'oeuvres. And then the marriage happens. La, 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 la. And then later on we go to sit at the same table. We just went through both feasts together, didn't we? Even though I say to you, hey, let's go into the feasts, plural. I'm meaning that we went through both of them together. We were talking before, now we're talking after at the same table. He's just referring to the fact they went through both passages of time and the ariston and the deipnon. That's why he says they entered into the nuptial feast. He's not saying feast plural in the future. He's saying in retrospect, they went through both of them together. They met, they entered in with him into the feast, plural, and the door was closed. The door was closed. And the door being closed here is the word ek in front of it again. Instead of just saying klithe, it's like klithe, it says ek klithe. That means out of those he took that were prepared, out of taking those, in other words, there wasn't like a happen chance situation going on. In other words, the Father inspected people as the fine wheat. It's okay, you come in, and then out of the inspection, the door was closed. It didn't just say they closed the door. Yeah, I didn't write the book. Why did you just not say klithe, which is K-L-E-I-S-T-H-E, but he put the word ek in front of it, which means out of closing the door. Out of closing the door, why would you say that? Out of what? Like, out of what reason did you close the door? Out of the fact that you inspected and verified and quantified these are the prepared ones, because you quantified these prepared ones. Out of that group that you quantified that comes in, out of that, you close the door. That's what he's referring to. And then he says, afterwards, then came those remaining virgins. Uh-oh. Those other foolish ones that did not, unfortunately, meet up to the mustard. And it says, they said to the Lord, 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 open to us. And many church entities say, let's go into heaven. Really? Really? Who, in fact, knocks on heaven's door, doesn't know Jesus, and goes, oh, could you let me in, please? How'd you even get there? It makes no sense. What you're saying is ignorant. It makes no sense. What person has the power to go, okay, I'm going to will myself to heaven right now. Ready, watch. Really? How can you do that? How do you do that? If you can do that, no offense, why you need Jesus? Because you're like a God yourself at that point. I mean, holy moly. You can actually just transport yourself to heaven, just like that. How did you get there knocking on the door if you're not even knowing who Jesus is? I want to know how you pull that off. What are you a Marvel comic now? What is this, real life now, comic book stuff? It's unbelievable. People believe that's true. People actually get there, they think, and they got there because they're sinners who belong to Satan, and they're going, I'm trying to trick Jesus. Shh, 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 shh. Hi, let us in? Oh, you didn't fall for that? Oh, man. Really? How do you, people teach that stuff. They actually think that these people are trying to trick themselves into heaven. How'd they get there? It makes what you're saying is so ignorant. It makes no sense. Just admit the truth. They're there because they already belong to him. Their behavior is unbecoming. That's why they're shut out. It's that simple. It's not hard to understand. When you let God just be God and stop letting your thoughts get involved with it. And so he ends up by saying to them, but indeed I say to you, I know you not. I mean, he said, I don't recognize you. I don't know you in that way, as in other words. Aido, that word aido, I don't know you in experiential or relationship ways. You know we should know each other. And he says, watch you therefore, verse 13, watch you therefore, for you not know the day nor the hour. And then that's how it ends. As if to say to the person again, he's surmising both presences with the day and the hour. He's telling them, be prepared when the day begins, so you can be prepared when the day ends. The day and the hour references in a singular tense, meaning be prepared going into the Perusia, so you can be prepared when the Perusia comes to an end. Because if you don't go into it ready, you're not going to end it ready. That's for sure. There's just, well, you might, but don't count on those odds. They're not good for you. That's what he's saying. Yes?
And first of all, Vicky said, I have note that this entering into both feasts is wave 2. Door there is singular. Pam said, no. Bob Dylan knocks on heaven's door. Ha.
Yeah, they're not. Yeah, so yeah, the nuptial feast is not dealing with a wave. This is dealing with the end of day 7, the end of 1,000-year reign on earth, and the end of that process of thought where you are in a day of the Ariston in heavens one day, but on earth it's 1,000 years. It's hard to understand, I know, but that's what God says in 2 Peter chapter 3 and verses, is it 8 to 10? 1,000 years a day, days 1,000 years. So it's a day in heaven, 1,000 years on earth, and at the end of that period, the nuptial feast, Ariston, going into a Deipnon, you have entered into both, and the door's closed. So there's no wave involved. The waves are before the Perusia. Remember? So this is the Perusia we're talking about now. There's no waves involved at all. Yes?
And then Vicky said, OM, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. And so when you think about that whole process, think about this too, by the way. The midnight hour, I'll end with this thought. People say, well, it's the midnight hour, but midnight you said was judgment, so why would there be a judgment time in heaven? Well, interesting to know. Why is there a cry? Why would remember John the Baptist cried out, but you knew why, right? Like, how do you think he knew that Jesus was 30 years old and it was time for him to begin his ministry? God told him that. He didn't figure that out. Come on. He did not sit down one day and go, okay, I'm going to decide. I'm going to do this. No. He was told when to start and what to say, and he said it. He did what he's supposed to do, so he was told when to start. Okay. My point is, midnight is a judgment type in Scripture, and that's right. On the earth, when 1,000 years ends, what happens? There's this great white throne of judgment, isn't there? Yeah. And that's why it's called the midnight hour, because midnight hour means it's a judgment on earth, literally, but it's a judgment that then leads itself into the inspection that takes place in the hour of heaven. And that's where John the Baptist is crying. He knows to cry out because he sees that happening down there, and we don't see it the way he sees it. He sees it from a different perspective that no one else knew, just like back in the day, no one knew but him. No one knew but him when to start preaching that voice in the wilderness. No one knew but him how old Jesus should be when he starts his ministry. He knew because God told him. God told him, start now. Say this now. River Jordan now. And he go, okay, fine. He went there and boom. He was there and he spoke it out. And here comes Jesus. What a coincidence. Coincidence in my eye. That was all ordained. Just like when John is in heaven, he's seeing everything from a different viewpoint than anybody else. And God prepares him as that voice, and he sees the at midnight hour, the judgment on the earth, the great white throne, and he goes, oh, it's about to happen. It's time. He's coming! He's coming! He's coming! Get ready! And then we're all like, what do you mean he's coming? The real deal's coming. Like, the festivities of, this is just the preparations of the bridegroom. He's actually coming here to sit on this throne. What? Yeah. And so they're like, wow, this is amazing. And the foolish are like, no, what do you say? What do you say? They get all like lackadaisical because he's finally coming. Really? I thought it was just to be, I thought we were supposed to be just doing this our whole life. No. No, not your whole life. He's on the earth for 1,000 years, and then he comes here. What do you mean he comes here? Well, you're about to find out, because you're not going to be here to find out. You've got to go down there. And that's what's going on in this marriage, feast, wise virgin, foolish virgin parable. So there's a lot to be said there. We had a lot of offshoots at the beginning of our teaching for today. We went over time, so we can end. Yes?
Yeah, I'm thinking 7 out of 10 if they
yeah, basically.
too foolish to get redeemed there. It's like a 2/3 thing. The third of the angels that fell and the 2/3 of the angels that.
Yeah, it's a 2/3 thing. Yeah.
So
I never thought of it like that. But that's a good point.
It is. I mean, it's close. It's as close to 2/3 as you can get out of 10.
Yeah.
7 out of 10.
It's really. It's really. And to think long ago that this was something that was told to me that Bob Bender, he said, this is what this is. It's happening after we're in heaven. I'm like, what? I don't know if he knew all that we're saying now. I don't think so. But he had the premise of this understanding. And so there's so many things that God has used other people, unlike other people who say, oh, this is all mine. No. I benefit a lot. People don't realize this, but I do benefit a lot from people's inputs to what I hear and what God tells me. And what I see in Scripture is never just all about me. Never has been, never will be. It's always about what God shows first and foremost, what His Word just says. But it's also because other people bring up things that challenge your mindset, that challenge your thoughts, that make you question things. And that's why I love the Q&A we have once a month too, which was Todd's idea. And all that stuff just comes back to bear about Like, why do we do this again? Why do we believe this again? And it makes you constantly vet yourself, which is good. And you constantly vet yourself to get better at understanding, why is that again? Or I'm missing something here, and God shows you stuff. That's good. That's good. And that's why I love studying God's Word. It's never like a place where you're just like, oh, I'm done. So like you said about the two, you just said that, for example. I didn't even know that. I think that's great. I didn't even think about that. But when you say it, though, it makes you go, gosh, that makes so much sense. And what God had done before. It just makes so much sense. It's awesome. And of course, 10 is God's ordinal number, and God's number, meaning ordained, He ordained us that to be the group of people that's going to be there. And then 5 is number for grace. He gave grace of His power and might to give each person an ample opportunity, in other words. So the foolish can't say, well, you ordained it to be foolish. Yeah, but I made it clear that you took the lampus and looked right past the looksnos. You looked right past the vessel of oil. You didn't care. I may have ordained it, but you went right past it. You're going to look back and know that it was your choice. That you just said, I don't care. And I don't know why you wouldn't do that. And I gave you time and time again chances to see why that was important. And you just were so content on being who you were, and whatever you want to call it, pride and arrogance, presumption, call it what you wish, but that was your demise. That's why you're not here anymore. That's why you're not a part of what you claimed you were a part of the whole time, which is ironic. The foolish think they're the bride, and they end up going like, what do you mean I'm not the bride? Matter of fact, you're not even in heaven anymore. What? Yeah, you're on earth forevermore. That's what happens. What? Well, hey, that you should have just been humble and contrite and just followed the steps of what you're supposed to do. Let God work it out. Don't get ahead of yourself, you know? Yeah, sorry.
Okay, Vicky said, just to confirm, the remaining one in verse 11 are the same as the virgin in those in verse 7.
The remaining ones that are in verse 11, afterwards the other virgin, the remaining ones, the Lapai. The Lapai virgins are the virgins that are left behind of the Morai that did not prepare themselves. So we're saying, because God's principle of a remnant, I'm anticipating that there was 2 of the 5 that God gave clemency to allow them to be prepared by their transversing down to the earth, those who market and sell, the unjust steward, and they came back with preparations. I'm guessing that. I don't know that. I just know that there has to be, it says the remaining, the way he's wording this is making me understand that he's trying to give us a clue that God's all about clemency, that's for sure. He already showed us before in Matthew 22, which makes, by the way, no sense to me why you would invite Paneros people to your Ariston. Go figure that, right? If he can do that, he can surely allow a foolish virgin who's dullish and sluggish in their mind, who had a fruit yield and obedient, to get the extra fruit yield needed to enter in as the diakonon, as the bride. I can see that. I don't see that. That's not inconsistent what he already did at the beginning of the Ariston. So I think that's why I think he did. So the remnant, the Lopoi here, Lapai, are the 3 of the 5, I think, which is the majority, meaning the minority of the ones, the 2 of the 5, are brought to the place of preparation. Because God's about a remnant all the time. He doesn't take a majority. He always takes the minority of people, not the majority of people, to prove a point. Yes?
And then Vicky said, the virgin, those in verse 7.
Yeah. So those in verse 7 who put their lamps in order, which are the foolish ones, the ones who are trying to trim and put their presentation, the ek kosmeson, they're trying to put a best presentation forward of those who then went to the earth as well. There was, all 5 of them went there, but only 2 got prepared, and the rest of them didn't, the 3. And they're the ones who were locked out in verse 11.
She said, okay.
Yeah. So anyway, so we'll hope that, and there's a lot probably to take in. I'm not sure if you followed all that today. There's a lot of information, right? It's a lot. So we will we'll end in prayer, and we'll continue to go over this on Friday as well, go through our appraisal, answer any questions, and we'll continue to go through our study. So let's pray. So Father, thank you for this time again. Thank you for the insight to you, your word, and everything that you continue to teach, show, and enlighten us with. Thank you for your truth, your love, your spirit, and your understanding. Guide us, direct us, continue to keep us safe and in your hands, and looking and seeking to do your will, pleasing to you. Thank you for all you are and all you are continuing to be in our life. We ask all this in Jesus, Yeshua's name. Amen.
You know, with the 2 that go down there, I mean, they have fellowship while they're trying to get that. I mean, if it was just one down there with the
That's true. There's